In April 1815, a mountain in Indonesia exploded with the force of 1 billion atomic bombs. Within 18 months, snow fell in Vermont in July, bread riots burned across Europe, and in a candlelit villa beside Lake Geneva, a teenage girl had a nightmare that became Frankenstein. This is the year the sky went dark, and the year a volcano accidentally invented horror fiction. Sumbawa Island, Indonesian archipelago. April 5, 1815. To the people who live here, the Tambora and Sanggar tribes, perhaps 10,000 strong, the mountain is simply Tambora, 4,000 meters high. Forested almost to its summit. It has not erupted within living memory. This morning, at dawn, the mountain coughs. A column of dark vapor rises perhaps a kilometer into the sky. It is heard as far as Java, 600 kilometers west. British ships at anchor mistake it for cannon fire and prepare for battle. Then the mountain falls silent. For 5 days, nothing. The villagers go back to their nets. The British officers shrug and return to their charts. The Dutch colonial administrators in Batavia note the sound in their logs and move on. No one understands what they have heard. No one is watching the mountain. They have 5 days. Evening. April 10, 1815. 7 o'clock. The mountain explodes. Not erupts. Explodes, the top kilometer of Tambora is blown off the planet. Pyroclastic flows, clouds of superheated gas and rock traveling at the speed of a fighter jet, pour down the flanks of the mountain and incinerate every village within 30 kilometers. The tribes of Tambora and Sanggar, the people who have spoken those languages for centuries, cease to exist that night. The eruption rates as a magnitude 7 on the volcanic explosivity index. 150 cubic kilometers of rock, enough to bury Manhattan beneath a column 3 kilometers tall, are thrown into the air. It is, as far as we can reconstruct, the largest volcanic eruption in 10,000 years of human history. The only larger event in our species' existence is Toba, an Indonesian super-eruption from 74,000 years ago. When the dust settles, the death toll on Sumbawa and neighboring Lombok climbs into the tens of thousands. Roughly 10,000 killed outright by blast and pyroclastic flow. Tens of thousands more in the months that follow, buried crops, poisoned water, famine, disease. But this is only the beginning. The eruption has also thrown roughly 60 megatons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. Up there, it reacts with water vapor and becomes a global veil of sulfuric acid droplets. It will not come down for 3 years. It will reflect sunlight back to space. And it will cool the entire planet by close to a full degree. The mountain has just changed the weather of the world. Nobody on Earth yet knows it. Spring, 1816. New England. The sky is wrong. In Vermont, in New Hampshire, in Maine, in Quebec, frost arrives in June. Snow falls on the village greens of Quebec on June 6. In northern New England, frost hits through August. The corn does not ripen. The hay does not grow. Farmers slaughter livestock they can no longer feed. Some pack their wagons and start walking west. The Great Migration to the Ohio Valley begins in part right here, in a year when New England starves. Across the Atlantic, it is worse. In Switzerland, the rye and wheat crops fail completely. In Bern, in Zurich, the price of bread doubles, triples, quadruples. Bread riots burn across Switzerland, France, the German states. Hungry families eat sawdust. They eat the bark off trees. In Ireland, a wet summer triggers a typhus epidemic that will kill 100,000 people. In Bengal, the monsoon arrives broken and late. Crops drown. The Ganges Delta floods unseasonably. A new strain of cholera, Vibrio cholerae, emerges from the disrupted wetlands and, by 1817, begins the first true cholera pandemic in human history. Some historians argue the climate disruption helped trigger it. The link is debated. The deaths are not. In Yunnan, in southwestern China, the rice crop fails 3 years running. Imperial Chronicles record snow in July and famine in August. Mothers sell their daughters to buy a single bag of grain. The estimates for the global death toll from this dimming, over 1816, 1817, and 1818, range from 100,000 to well over 1 million. The precise number, we will never know. The point is this. A mountain in Indonesia has reached across the ocean and emptied the larders of 3 continents. And meanwhile, in a corner of Switzerland, 5 young writers are about to be trapped indoors. Lake Geneva. Mid-June, 1816. A villa called Diodati. 3 stories of pale stone, dark shutters, a balcony staring out over the storm-gray lake. Inside, by the fire, are 5 people. Lord Byron is 28. The most famous poet in Europe. He has rented the villa to escape an English scandal involving his half-sister. Beside him, 20 years old, is his personal physician, John William Polidori, dark-eyed, mocked by Byron, secretly furious. On the sofa is Percy Bysshe Shelley, 23, also a poet, also notorious. Next to him sits his lover, 18 years old, pale, brilliant, Mary Godwin. She is not yet Mary Shelley, she will marry Percy in December. And beside Mary is her stepsister, Claire Claremont, 17, pregnant with Byron's child. It is meant to be a summer of riding and walking by the lake. It is the wrong summer. The rain does not stop. The mountains are hidden in cloud. The lake is a sheet of gray. For days, they cannot leave the house. They read German ghost stories aloud to each other from a book called Phantasmagoria. They take laudanum. They argue about the nature of life. Percy is fascinated by the new work of Luigi Galvani, who has made dead frogs' legs twitch with electricity. Can a corpse be reanimated by lightning? Can life itself be a chemical accident? And then, on a night that history records as June 16, 1816, Byron makes a proposal. We will each, he says, write a ghost story. Byron starts a fragment and abandons it. Percy starts something based on his own childhood and gives up. Claire writes nothing. Only Polidori, the mocked physician, produces a complete tale. He calls it The Vampire. His vampire, Lord Ruthven, is a thinly veiled portrait of Byron himself. The story will be published in 1819. 80 years later, an Irish theatre manager named Bram Stoker will read it. He will write a novel called Dracula, the blueprint for the modern vampire. The aristocratic seducer, the predator in evening dress, is being written, that wet week, by Byron's furious doctor. And then there is Mary. For days, she has tried to think of a story and failed. Then, on a night she later remembers in detail, she lies awake in the small hours and sees, clearly, behind her closed eyes, what she calls a waking dream. She sees Asterisk, the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. Asterisk, she sees the thing open its yellow eye. She sees the student flee in horror from what he has made. The next morning, she writes the first sentence. It will become a novel. The novel will be published anonymously on January 1st, 1818. Its title is Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. One stalled summer. One storm. 2 foundational monsters, the vampire and the reanimated corpse, born in the same villa within a single week. The dimming of the planet has, in the most literal sense, turned its writers inward, and given the modern world the genres of horror fiction and science fiction. The aftermath of the eruption does not announce itself as the aftermath. It arrives sideways, in unlikely inventions and odd colors of paint. Mannheim, in the German Rhineland, 1817. A forestry official named Karl Drees is watching horses die. Horses have starved across Europe, oat crops failed in 1816, and the animals that pulled the carts and plowed the fields are starving in their stables. Drees designs a personal vehicle that does not need to be fed. He calls it the loft machine, the running machine. 2 wheels in line, a wooden frame, foot pushed. The first bicycle. It is, in the most direct sense, a Tambora invention. A volcano in Indonesia killed the horses of the Rhineland and gave us the bicycle. Meanwhile, in London, the most famous painter in Britain is studying the sky. Joseph Mallord William Turner is painting sunsets. The sunsets of 1815, 1816, 1817, 1818 are stranger than any sunsets London has seen. The whole western sky burns orange and red for an hour after the sun is gone. Turner, with his obsessive eye for atmospheric color, paints them as he sees them. 2 centuries later, atmospheric scientists will use his paintings as scientific data, sampling the pigments, reconstructing the aerosol concentrations, confirming that those orange skies were a literal optical record of Tambora's sulfuric veil, still suspended 40 kilometers above the earth. A bicycle in Germany. A sunset on a London canvas. The signature of a volcano nobody in Europe has ever seen. Frankenstein was published anonymously in January, 1818. 500 copies. Modest reviews. Some critics admired it. Others called it ugly. None of them yet understood what they were reading. The first stage adaptation arrives in 1823, Presumption, or The Fate of Frankenstein. It is a hit. By the time Mary Shelley dies in 1851, her monster has played in dozens of theaters on 2 continents. The novel has been reprinted, revised, attributed to her by name. The modern Prometheus has become a household word for hubris, for the scientist who creates what he cannot control. In 1931, Universal Pictures releases James Whale's Frankenstein, Boris Karloff in flat-top makeup. Neck bolts. The laboratory. The lightning storm. None of this is in Mary Shelley's novel. All of it is about Mary Shelley's novel. The film makes back its budget in 2 weeks. It becomes the foundation of an entire genre. Mary's monster, born in a candlelit Swiss villa, in a wet June, because a volcano in Indonesia had cooled the planet, becomes the prototype for every modern science fiction story about a creator and its creation. Frankenstein is the ancestor of every robot uprising. Every artificial intelligence parable. Every cloning thriller. Every story about a thing we made that we cannot unmake. The vampire and the maid man are now everywhere. They began in the same room, in the same week, under the same dim sun. How do we know all of this is true? How do we know it was really Tambora, and not the weather, not coincidence, not a story historians have stitched together backward? The answer lies in ice. In Antarctica, at Dome Sea and at Vostok, climate scientists drill cylindrical cores hundreds of meters down into the ice sheet. Each centimeter of ice is a year of preserved atmosphere, bubbles of ancient air, dust, ash, sulfuric acid. They count downward. At a depth corresponding to the year 1815, in core after core after core, they find the same thing, a sulfate spike, vast and unmistakable, larger than almost any other in the past 10,000 years. The ice remembers. The eruption is there, fossilized in frozen sulfur, exactly where the historical records say it should be. The painters and the diarists and the ice cores all tell the same story. And today, atmospheric scientists studying solar geoengineering, the controversial proposal to deliberately dim the sun to slow climate change, look back at Tambora as their natural experiment. The model. The warning. We know what happens when sulfur fills the stratosphere. We have data from 1816. One mountain reshaped a year. It killed perhaps 1 million people. It dimmed the sun over 3 continents. It bankrupted farmers in Vermont and starved horses in Mannheim. It painted Turner's skies. It put a monster in Mary Shelley's head. And then it sank back into the sea and waited. The biggest events in human history do not always come from human hands. If this changed how you see the modern world, subscribe. We reconstruct a lost age every week.